Let's just take these three, and we'll wrap up with these. And let's talk with Matthew. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, James.
Yep.
I have a question about Aisha and the history of Islam.
Uh-huh.
So I ran into, I had a discussion with a group of Muslims a couple of weeks ago, and the question of Aisha's age came up. I didn't bring it up, but there was a man who had come, not with our group, but with someone else, and he was very bombastic in asserting that Muhammad was with this, essentially child bride.
Right.
And I didn't take that route. But I recently read a book about early Islamic history that seemed to assert that Aisha may have made up the youngness of her own age to try to give her more prestige, to say that she had been with the Prophet longer than her the other wives. So I'm just asking what your opinion is on all that.
Well, the documentation is pretty strong. The marriage is contracted at 6 and takes place at 9. Was that wildly unusual at that time? No, it wasn't. As I've said many, many times, you have to. I realize that a lot of people, this is their go-to argument. The number one reason why this is an important issue is the elevation of Muhammad to the point of being the example of human behavior for all people at all times. That's the issue. That results in child brides. That results in the bad stuff that comes from this. But that's a separate question from the facts of the historical record. And then the recognition, and this is where, again, the bombastic folks don't care about this, but I care about being consistent in applying the same standards to Islam that I apply to my own faith. And so I think I bookmarked it. I watched a video that was put out by, and it's one of those videos that we haven't gotten good enough to do yet ourselves, but it's where you've got the person talking and then you've got stuff going on around them and graphics and stuff, and it's very engaging. And it was a interesting attempt to get around the issue of Aisha, and it did raise all sorts of questions about how in the early history of the United States, the age of consent was extremely low in certain states, and goes through all these people that had these very, very early marriages and blah, 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 blah. And that is why when I deal with Aisha, I'm either going to deal with Aisha in the sense of the elevation of Muhammad to the standard of all behavior, or the contrasting of the fact that the Quran shows no embarrassment whatsoever about Aisha. In fact, as you sort of alluded to there, Aisha is looked upon as the mother of the faithful because she's the only virgin wife of Muhammad. Everybody else had been previously married. And she, obviously, according to the stories, Muhammad dies in her lap. She is the source of a huge amount of the Hadith literature. She's extremely beloved by the Sunni, not so much by the Shiites, et cetera, et cetera. The Aisha issue, you're dealing with a beloved woman amongst the Sunnis who have already heard every accusation under the sun. And so it's almost as bad as trying to discuss John 1:1 with Jehovah's Witnesses at the front door. They've heard it all before. You want to go a different direction, actually get them thinking. And the Aisha direction, I find just to be a huge closed door until a later period in time. And so they do have their answers. They do have their apologists. I don't necessarily accept what they're saying, but I likewise recognize that the serious discussion of Aisha needs to be focused someplace else than where it normally is.
I'm so glad you say that, because I used to take the Aisha question much more central, and it really closed a lot of doors.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your ministry and having. Oh, really? Yeah. I especially with Muslim women, like I did the whole, Muhammad practically a rapist thing. It completely shut her down. She looked heartbroken. I never got a chance to talk to her again. I was very upset with myself over that. That was not the right thing to do. Yeah. But thanks to
well, Matthew, keep in mind, I have been vociferously attacked, not by Muslims but by Christians, for expressing my concerns about how we approach that subject and how to approach it. So mainly by people who think it's the very central thing you should be talking about all the time. So that's the way the world works right now. So hopefully that's helpful to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much.
All right. God bless. Bye-bye.
The U.S. government criticizes other countries that allow child marriages. But it turns out that here in the U.S., hundreds of thousands of young girls have gotten married over the last 10 years, and they did it legally. Now, there's an organization known as Unchained at Last, and they do studies and they look into the issue of child marriage here in the United States. And so they looked at data from 2000 to 2010, and what they found was that girls as young as 12 years old get married off here in the United States. So apparently their laws in 27 states do not specify an age below which a child cannot marry, right? So most states indicate that you have to be 18 years old in order to get married, but some states make exceptions. So for instance, if you're in Idaho and you have an underage daughter that you want to marry off, all you have to do is give the courts your consent as a parent, and that young girl can get married. Now, in 38 states, more than 167,000 children, almost all of them girls, some of them as young as 12, were married during that period, again, 2000 to 2010, mostly to men 18 or older. And that's estimated that the total number of children wed in America between 2000 and 2010 was nearly 248,000.
Wow. But I hope the mullahs who married him are happy and proud. This is one of the reasons that people sometimes give as to why we should invade Middle Eastern countries.
Yes, that's exactly right.
You know that they married off the kids. Oh, look at these pedos or pedos or whatever they are, marrying off the kids at 12, 13. Now, that's not a bad point, of course, in that that's a terrible way to conduct affairs. It's not a good point as to why we should invade them. If you think it's a good reason as to why we should invade them, West Virginia and Idaho, buckle up because we're about to invade you. And so we don't pick those states out of nowhere. Obviously, some parts of the country are more used to this than others.
Right. And look, I think that our audience is smart, and they know that anytime someone uses that excuse to invade a country, it's not really about protecting young girls from child marriages. There are all sorts of other very corrupt reasons why we invade other countries. But here in the United States, this is an issue that you see in various religions. It's not just Muslims or Christians. You also see this trend with some Orthodox Jews as well. So it doesn't matter what the religion is. You see it with fundamentalists in the country. Also, at least 31% of these girls were married to a spouse aged 21 years or older, which is insane. Some children were married at an age or with a spousal age difference that constitutes statutory rape under their state's laws.
In ancient times, people actually got married much earlier than we would accept as reasonable today. Usually a Jewish girl, for example, did her bat mitzvah at 13 years old or sometimes 12 years old, and she was considered suitable for marriage. So Mary was already betrothed to Joseph. She was probably only 12 years old at the time. In Arabia, perhaps girls did get married earlier because there were no high schools to attend, no university degrees to pursue, and a woman's prime contribution to her tribe might have been to bear children, perhaps more so sons, who would defend the tribes in battle.